Hello. Today we're actually on the back side of my Lego village, but there's actually a lot going on the back side here. And the thing that we want to discuss most in today is one of my original builds. And this build is the Ferris Wheel. And I had a lot of fun designing it and building it, and then I had to do several modifications and redesigns on it just because it was so incredibly fragile of a piece. But I think I've got it to the point where it's pretty good right now. And so here is the Ferris wheel. But it's also one of my taller pieces, primarily because this is the street level right here. And as you know from some of my other videos, I've got a subway system and quite an underground system before you get down to the water level, because again, this is an island village. So I ended up having to build this big base underneath here just to get it up to the street level. It's my own creation, but of course, like a lot of my creations, I look for inspiration from other designs that I see on the web or on the different Lego blogs. And so this one was actually inspired by a much larger Ferris wheel that probably would have taken up this entire half of the village had I built it to that size. So this one stays within the half square, the 5" by 10" or 16 by 32 stud base plate, except that it overhangs a little bit on the front side because of this awning. It's right here, and the awning covers the struts that go up to hold the actual wheel itself. You see that the wheel itself has a pivot point up here, and it's got a Technique piece, Lego Technique piece there, around which it rotates. And these are the struts that go up and hold that piece. Now, originally, like I mentioned, I went through several different designs on this and several different builds. Originally, I just had these two pieces here and here, and they pivot about a stud piece here and here on the frame. Well, what I found is that it tended to move back and forth. So what I ended up having to do was add these two extra little struts right here to kind of stabilize it a little bit. So that was one of my first redesigns. The biggest, let me turn it around again so you can see a little bit better. The biggest back and forth was the wheel itself. I'm going to go ahead and carefully pull this off so we can talk about the construction of the wheel a little bit better. Get a good grip on it here. Okay. Now, what you see here, of course, is the Technique piece about which it pivots, and I can take that off, and a little spacer plate. And what I have here are hinge pieces that I alternately locked together, and they allowed me to form an actual round piece that was the start of my base. And from there, I used the plates that radiated out from there. And we have 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12 different seats, 12 different radiating spokes. And so that's what keeps it together, are those hinge pieces that are alternately locked together back and forth. Now, it rotates around and I don't know if you can see this or not, right in there, those red pieces are just 2x2 rounds. Okay, so let's put this back on. And what I wanted to do here was to kind of emulate a wheel-like structure. So I went ahead and got some Technique pieces that were in the corners here that formed about the right angle for us to form this wheel. And then we have some stud pieces in between here and the pieces that are locked on to the spokes. And what that does is that allowed me a little bit of flexibility because they can slide in and out a little bit there just to form the wheel that I needed. And what I found was that this was way too flimsy. It would fall apart every time I tried to turn it. So the first thing I did was add the second wheel here on each side. And that wheel is made out of the same Technique pieces that are studded together here and here, and then with the little axle pieces here that I was able to clamp together around the spoke pieces. Now, the other thing that we had issues with was that the two wheels tended to move back and forth with each other. So I added, again, another Technique piece here that kept them separated. Now I'm going to go ahead and put the wheel back on there. Again, very carefully. One of the biggest challenges I had was how to build the seats, because you'll see as it rotates, the seats have to rotate as well, so that they remain vertical as the wheel rotates. And they actually do that very well now, but initially they had a tendency to wander back and forth, so that they would jam up, and then all of a sudden you'd get a seat that was flipping over with the wheel or impeding the wheel from actually working. So I'll show you what I did to solve that problem. Oops. And again, you'll notice as I take a seat out, it rotates up so that the empty spot is at the top. Again, that's just a balance thing. But what we have right here is an axle piece that goes across, and I use these little stud pieces here such that they could be slid onto the axle. So these two out here keep the wheels separated, the two sides of the wheel, and this one keeps the seat centered. There's the seat, but I've got two little Technique pieces here and here that hold the axle piece and allow it to rotate. And the issue I had with these was that I originally just had a holder piece here on this axle, so that these pieces had a tendency to rotate back and forth this way, and they were held in place by the axle, but it was very, very fragile. And then anytime a seat would fall out, which they did fairly frequently because these tended to rotate outward, the whole thing would start falling apart. So we couldn't have that, of course. I got a one with a pin on a block with a pin on both sides, actually the base and the side, so that I could lock this curved piece into the spoke, so that they no longer have the ability to rotate about this axis here. And that holds them in place so that I can put the seats carefully back in. Now, in the original design, one of the other issues I was having was that, actually we'll turn it this way so you can see, was that the wheels as they rotated were jamming up against these spokes here, because originally they were kind of on an angle like this that would jam the wheel at the bottom. So I ended up moving it out by actually rebuilding the base. It was originally another stud in, so I rebuilt the base to move it out, and then flipped the studs to the other side, or the struts to the other side. So, like a lot of stuff in my village and a lot of my original builds, it's a work in progress. And I think I finally got this down to the point where I'm pretty happy with it, with one big exception. And this was something that one of the followers on my blog, or my YouTube channel, Lego YouTube channel, suggested, was that I try and find a way to motorize the system. For right now, the Ferris wheel is operable, but not motorized. Although we do have this nice little platform down here below, would make a good place for for a motor. So maybe we'll do another video at some point to show you how I've motorized it. But until then, let's go ahead and put it back into the city. And let me give you a closer look. And you can see the various parts, the spreader bars I put in, how I built the spokes, and the hinge pieces that form the base of the wheel. And we go down and you can see how the struts needed to be reinforced so they didn't rotate back and forth. And we get down to the base. And we come around to the other side, and you can see a little bit more plainly the street fair. So that is the Ferris wheel and where it fits into the city.